So this is the first time that we've heard from Cyndy Murray, really, in the whole 9 months. And it's kind of ironic that her big interview is about 2 or 3 minutes long, when from the very beginning we've had Belinda coming out and being very open and giving us a lot of information. Just from the time that she spent on Sunny's show alone, she's given us several hours worth of audio talking about Lily and Jack, talking about Malaya, talking about the search and all these sorts of things. So it's, a little bit disappointing that this is all we have from Cyndy. And I feel that she's really given us very little. As in, there's no startling revelations here that give us any greater insight into anything, as far as I'm concerned. I did get the impression, though, that this was the intention, that she was holding back. She wasn't going to give any sort of information that could be shared on social media. Now, we know that Angela McIver is pretty good at asking the right questions to get really good answers out of people, but this seems like a really soft interview, so I don't know if there were arrangements made beforehand that, okay, I will do this interview with you on these conditions, because it certainly seems like nothing's been pushed here, unless, of course, there is a bigger interview that is just being kind of held aside to be released at a later date at a more appropriate time. Now, before I jump in and have a look at what Cyndy did actually say, I just want to offer an apology. I know I said that I was going to go live this morning my time, which would have been like last night your time, but then thankfully someone pointed out to me that it was going to be the Super Bowl. So for starters, I wouldn't have had much of an audience, but not only that, had I gone live earlier, I would have been clashing with other content creators who would have also been going live earlier. So I decided just to push it back one day. So if you didn't catch my discussion in my last video, the live stream that I'm going to be doing is actually talking about the case of Gus Lamont, who's the little 4-year-old boy who went missing in South Australia, here in Australia. I haven't covered the case so far, but now that the South Australia Police have come out and said this is a criminal matter, I'm going to cover it. Certainly not as extensively as Jack and Lilly's case. I'll only be doing updates when they're released from South Australia Police, anything significant that comes up. But it is a case that I've been sort of quietly watching in the background, not catching every news release, but quietly watching it. And I think there's a lot of similarities with Lily and Jack's case. There's a lot of things that open more discussions in relation to Lily and Jack, and that also give us a little bit more insight into their case. So I think it's a good case for me to be looking at alongside Lily and Jack's. Now, another update that I probably need to give people is this morning I uploaded to Patreon the latest lot of lifted redactions. So that was like 3 pages in like a grid form. So that is now on my Patreon. It is free to upload. Basically, all you have to do is join my Patreon, and that is free also. So if you're after those documents, then you can upload them free from Patreon. Also, I need to do a thank you to the people who've been doing super thanks this week, and also to the people who've bought me coffees through the Buy Me a Coffee app. Because, as you know, I've just bought my MacBook, so that's certainly helping me to kind of boost my finances again after that large investment. And on that note, thank you to the people who gave me feedback on the audio. It's really encouraging to know that from buying this Mac that I'm getting more than just an ability to live stream, but that I'm also getting better audio quality. Admittedly, you're still going to get the fan sounds in the warmer months and the dogs snoring in the cooler months, and the dog's playing right now, sorry. But, you know, for the most part, you're still getting better audio. I think you're going to hear Mouse going bonkers in the background because it doesn't seem like he's going to stop anytime soon. So if I wait for him to finish, I might not get this video done. Given that I've had to wait till the evening for it to cool off because I was working on a members video this morning, I think I'm just going to push on. Anyway, let's jump in and have a look at this audio from Cyndy Murray.
They were very sweet kids. Lily's laughter, she was so exciting to be around. She was full of life.
Cute.
Jack, he would love his dinosaurs and he loved his little zoo animals and he would play with those for a long time, and he would come like to the barn and he loved to see the horses, and yeah, they had a lot of fun. They were fun kids.
Okay, so let's start with the glaringly obvious, and that is that she's speaking about them in the past tense continuously. I feel so sad for her because clearly she knows the deal. I actually don't believe that she knows what happened to Lily and Jack. From what I've heard from Hayley, from what I'm learning about Malaya, I doubt that she would have confided anything in Cyndy with relation to what happened to the children, but I have no doubt that Malaya knows exactly what happened to her children. I'm glad that she has mentioned that they were sweet kids, because when you look at the photos, they appear to be sweet kids. From what we've heard from Belinda, they sound like sweet kids, and certainly, you know, that bond between them. So that shows that that's a complete utter lie that Daniel came up with in the last couple of months, where he was trying to make it sound like they were violent children. There is nothing that I see in the photos that would make me think those children were violent children, and you have their own grandmother saying they were very sweet kids. So that just confirms for me that Daniel was basically victim blaming. He was too gutless to admit that he was violent with the children, so instead he blames Lily for hitting Jack. It's also such a contradiction to hear Cyndy saying that about Lily's laughter, how she was so exciting to be around. This is in such a stark contrast to the negativity that we've heard from Janie, because Janie did not like having those kids around. Whereas it sounds like Cyndy would have been more than happy for those kids to have been there 24/7. Okay, it might have been a little bit exhausting because it sounds like they had a lot of energy, but certainly sounds like they had that sort of energy that would lift you up. You know, to say someone is exciting to be around, it's like that contagious energy that they bring, that joy of life that just somehow lifts you up and makes your day. And her descriptions certainly seem to fit with what we've heard from Belinda as also, like Jack being more subdued, enjoying just spending that alone time playing with his toys. Sounds like that was something that was his quiet time. Lily just being full of life, full of energy. But I love hearing that they had fun. They were fun kids, because I don't think that was the situation at Gairloch Road. It sounds like Jack had a real affinity with, not just with his bugs, but with animals, because she said he loved to go to the barn and see the horses. So it sounds like he was a really gentle, sweet soul. But her comments in terms of they had a lot of fun, they were fun kids, the photos that we see that were not at Gairloch Road, the ones where they are at the beach, or that one where Jack is jumping off a log or something, they do look like they were having a lot of fun. And it sounds like Cyndy used to do things for them that were for enrichment and for fun. But not only that, when children are living in an environment where their fight or flight response is active 100% of the time, to be able to go somewhere safe where they can just be kids and not have to be on full alert the whole time, then you do see that change, because the fight or flight response isn't as strong, because they're removed from that dangerous environment that in a child's mind, it is a dangerous environment to live somewhere where you don't know when the next blow is going to come. And even Belinda said, she said when Jack started school, he seemed happier. And for them, time spent at Cyndy's would have been a happy time for them, a time of safety, a time of fun activities, going to the beach, going and visiting the horses, or just playing outside or hunting for Easter eggs. Her tone is very flat, and she's constantly pausing when she's talking about Lily and Jack. So I'm trying to figure out if maybe she's on medications because of what's going on, or maybe it is just 9 months gets you down. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Malaya and Hayden are her only children, aren't they? So in terms of grandchildren, she's only had 3 grandchildren and 2 of them have gone. So that must be so hard for her. Regardless of her relationship with Malaya, regardless of whether or not she is protecting Malaya, this is a grandmother who has lost 2 of her 3 grandchildren. And of course, with Meadow being just a baby, her relationship with her would have been very, very different. I'd imagine that it must be hard when Wade's grandchildren are there, or granddaughter. I'm not sure how many grandchildren he's got, but it must be hard for Cyndy to still want to engage and be the caring step-grandmother with those children, but to, feel that pain of missing your 2 eldest grandchildren at the same time. But certainly from the way she's talking, I would say that this has really not been an easy experience for her.
We went to the beach a lot. They liked the water. They played with the sand, and we would make little sand castles with their baskets, and we had a Easter egg hunt at my place, and they were running around laughing, and I miss them calling me Nene, and we'd color, and they'd play on their little tablets. I miss everything.
Okay, I'm super curious. Do you think they called her Nene because she was the grandmother with the horses? Because I can't make Nene from Cyndy in any way. There's a lot of disjointed thoughts and unfinished sentences here, more so in this part than in the earlier part, which takes me back to what I was saying about, is she on medication? Is she just really struggling because of this whole situation? I certainly feel for her, that's for sure. I do wonder also, though, if they're using photo prompts, because I know with Jack's birthday, when I asked Belinda to share a few thoughts with me about Jack, I suggested, have a look, go through photos, have a look at some photos. And, she did that, and it was very painful for her. I think in the end she didn't do a lot of audio because it was just too painful talking about Jack. So I would imagine Cyndy's experiencing the same thing, particularly if, as it sounds, she's come to terms with them no longer being alive. And I think she has, because everything is in past tense. So it would be really painful at this moment in time to be talking about them, to be looking at images of them, even just to be thinking about them. I have to say, these photos of Jack when he is playing with the water really do show that he loved the water. In terms of sensory issues, I find it really interesting that we have that birthday video where you can see that Jack got icing on his hands and he didn't like it. He was quite upset by it. But Cyndy's talking here about going to the beach and then making sandcastles and playing in the sand. So there's quite a contrast there. But then when I think back to when I was little, because I had so many sensory issues that come with ADHD, and I hated the feel of the sand on my hands. If my hands got sandy, I'd be straight down to the water to rinse them off. So maybe it was that thing of they were happy to play in the sand because they knew they could go and wash them in the water straight away. So Wade said that the last time they saw them was around Easter time. So this Easter egg hunt that she's talking about must have been the last time that she saw them. And what's interesting here is that, she's describing it like she's replaying it in her head. We had an Easter egg hunt at my place. They were running around and laughing. Why this really stands out to me is because she's got that memory there of the last time she saw them. But when it comes to Malaya, she doesn't even know what time she put them to bed on the Thursday night. If she actually put them to bed, which I doubt. But her account of the Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, the last time she was with her children, is very vague, very lacking in details. It's on par with Jen Soto and her many different versions of the Sunday night when she allegedly last saw Maddie. She didn't even know what Maddie was wearing. I mean, Malaya thinks they went outside, although that only came out in a later interview. And she thinks they must have come in before dark. And she fed them something, but there's no details on that. And they went to bed at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Not really sure. Last time she saw her kids, but it hasn't stuck in her memory. So Cyndy's description of the Easter egg hunt just highlights that even more. And in terms of them having only seen them at Easter time, and then that gap between Easter and then when they went missing, it is such a shame because you listen to the things that Cyndy was doing with them, and clearly they were getting proper enrichment with her. She was doing colouring with them, and they were playing on their tablets. They were going to the beach and making sandcastles. All these things that allow children to improve their fine motor skills and their gross motor skills. I can't help thinking that they probably didn't even have coloured pencils at their house in Gairloch Road. I could be wrong, but when you hear that they were far behind their peers at school, yes, most of that would come from the trauma that they were living through. But at the same time, even children who are living in an environment where there is trauma, if they are still given things at home that allow them enrichment, then they're not going to lag behind as much. While obviously we do need to take everything Janie says with a grain of salt, I do think that her saying that they were pretty much fending for themselves and not getting a lot of attention from Malaya, that rings true to me.
Brooks Murray's mother says the past 9 months have been torture. Cyndy Murray didn't want to be interviewed on camera, but she told CBC the hardest part for her family is not knowing what happened.
It's just a nightmare. I can't describe it. It's mental torture to figure out, how come it's taking so long.
I think there's a bit of deflection going on here. I think what she's saying is not what she's thinking. So they're saying that she's told them that the hardest part for the family is not knowing what happened and that the past 9 months have been torture. And then we get this audio of Cyndy saying it's a nightmare. I can't describe it. It's mental torture trying to figure out, how come it's taking so long. The how come it's taking so long should be more of a afterthought as opposed to the cause of the mental torture. The mental torture would be them being missing and not knowing where they are and not knowing what happened. Things like that, the things that are more closely connected to Lily and Jack, as opposed to wondering why it is taking so long. Yes, it would be frustrating, but the torture would be the not knowing. The torture would be just the lack of change in the situation. Waking up every day to the same thing. Your grandchildren are missing and you don't know what happened or where they are. So why the evasion? I think that probably in her mind she knows that Malaya is somehow partly involved in this, that Malaya knows what happened to the children. And I think that's probably the torture that she's referring to. And she's just taken a quick U-turn and said, after saying it's mental torture trying to figure it out, or trying to figure out, you get the like. That is a typical filler. It's like slamming on the brakes here. I don't want to say what the mental torture is. I need to come up with something really quickly. I'll just say, how come it's taking so long? And again, referring to it as a nightmare. Wondering why it's taking so long isn't the nightmare that she's referring to. And from what Hayley has said, it sounds like the whole situation has divided the family as well. So I would imagine that Cyndy's nightmare has very little to do with wondering how long it's going to take. Why is it taking so long? But more to do with the current dynamics in the family. Probably that mother's intuition that her daughter is not telling her things. I mean, from everything we've seen, from everything we've heard from Cheryl and Hayley and this Angeline, it sounds like Malaya is trying to play innocent. She knows absolutely nothing about what happened with her children. It's just one hell of a coincidence that her and Daniel just happened to have the same script and the same part in the same script, and that their stories contradict each other, and that they're both exposed as liars because of the way their stories contradict each other. But I would imagine from what we know of the relationship between Cyndy and Malaya, that Cyndy probably sees right through that act. So I wonder if she's asked some of those difficult questions of Malaya in the last 9 months and maybe got lies in response or got evasive answers in response. Because based on her statement to Please Bring Me Home, based on things that she said to Belinda in messages, it sounds like Malaya has created this own little fantasy story in her head where she is completely innocent of all this and she knows nothing about what happened to her children, and she thinks that maybe they have been abducted and she wants an Amber Alert. All this sort of really unrealistic stuff that she's putting out there as if she believes it. And if it weren't for the evidence that shows that her and Daniel concocted their stories together and that they screwed up and contradicted each other, or that they took the same role in their little script, if it wasn't for those things, you could almost be convinced that she is completely oblivious to whatever happened to her children. But at the end of the day, you can see they have corroborated on their stories. She is in this up to her eyeballs. So I'd love to know what Cyndy really thinks of this situation, because I can't help thinking that when she's talking about the nightmare and the mental torture trying to figure out why it's taking so long, to me it sounds like, these are more like responses of someone who has that mental torture of thinking that their loved one is somehow involved, but not wanting to think that. That sense of, I'm her mother, I should be supporting her, I shouldn't be thinking these things, but I can tell she's lying to me. I can tell she's not telling me the full story. That sort of thing. I think that is what is behind Cyndy's comments here.
Cute.
Cyndy Murray says RCMP don't provide many details, but as time ticks on, it's harder to be patient.
I hope that they're checking every avenue and doing as much as they possibly can.
Okay, this statement about patience is very, very telling. Saying as time ticks on, it's harder to be patient. Because if it is a mental torture to be wondering how come it is taking so long, which is what she said earlier, then you would be incapable of being patient at all, full stop, period. So that shows us that this mental torture has got nothing to do with wondering why it's taking so long. In terms of the RCMP not providing many details, I would imagine that in that instance she's referring to them not providing many details to Malaya, because we know that for Belinda as a grandmother, she's really struggled to get information, and that I would imagine Cyndy would be in the same position. The expectation from the RCMP would be their liaison would talk with Malaya, and it's up to Cyndy to actually get information from her daughter. They're not going to give Malaya much information at all, because obviously they are still investigating her very closely, in my opinion. And when you hear that the RCMP is even keeping the family out of the loop, that tells you a lot. Again, that shows you how they are investigating this disappearance, and that they do have, while they're not going to name it, they do have their suspects. And those suspects are going to get very little information from them. Certainly nothing that is going to compromise their investigation. Now, this comment, I hope they're checking every avenue and doing as much as they possibly can. I find that really interesting, because that would suggest that she's not been following any of the information that's been coming out about the case, even through the media. Because we've certainly been shown in the last month or so that they really are following every avenue they can, ticking every box and working their butts off on this case. So for Cyndy to express this in these terms, I hope they're doing this, suggests that she doesn't know that they are doing this. I actually think this is just a statement that she's come out with for want of a better thing to say, because probably what she wants to say she's not going to say publicly. Because on one hand she's saying they don't provide many details. So if they're not providing you with many details, wouldn't you be doing the same as Belinda and just going through every single bit of media that's released, watching multiple YouTube channels, just to try and get some information, just to try and put it all together in your head? But it doesn't sound, that latter statement doesn't sound like that's what she's doing. That makes no sense to me. It actually sounds like it's scripted by Malaya. It's got that same feel about it as a lot of Malaya's statements. The completely no idea what's going on, no idea what happened to the children, and I just hope that we'll find out soon. In Malaya's case, we know that is definitely an act. Oh, you get a bit of snoring tonight. It's been a while. Sorry. In Malaya's case, we know that's definitely an act. We know, fairly certainly, that she knows what happened to her children. But coming from Cyndy, after saying that they don't get details from the RCMP, I'm wondering if she's genuine here, or if this is just her trying to find a way of avoiding the difficult part of the conversation, the part where perhaps she does suspect that Malaya knows a heck of a lot more about this situation and that Malaya is holding back a lot of information from her family. For me, what Cyndy has said all seems very much disjointed. It doesn't seem to fit together properly. She's speaking about Lily and Jack in the past tense, and she has trouble talking about them. It is far more disjointed when she's talking about Lily and Jack than it is when she's talking about the investigation. And of course, if she does believe that they are deceased, then clearly she's not believing this abduction theory that Durwood was putting out, that was also being pushed by Daniel. We know that one of the arguments on the driveway was apparently her family believed that Daniel was responsible. We heard Wade say when he was talking with Tint that he believed that Daniel was the person that caused the children to not be alive. So if Cyndy believes the children aren't alive, she doesn't believe there was an abduction, clearly, because the abduction story is all about them being still alive somewhere, safely hidden away. But also, the RCMP have said no sign of an abduction. So if in her head she rules out the possibility of abduction, whatever happened to these children, they are no longer alive. Well, that only leaves the two scenarios, them wandering off into the woods and getting lost, or something happening to them on the property. Now, we've heard from so many people that it's extremely unlikely that they wandered off and got lost in the woods, because they would have been found. There would have been some sign of them. Even if they crawled into some teeny tiny space, that backpack would have been dumped on the ground beforehand. There is absolutely no evidence of them having wandered off into the woods. So, in Cyndy's mind, that would surely have to leave the one thing that something happened to them on that property on Gairloch Road. And if that is the case, how can she not think that Malaya is somehow involved? How can she not think that Malaya has some sort of knowledge about all this? For me, it's actually a red flag, her not wanting to appear on camera. Because usually when people don't want to appear on camera, they've got something to hide. Look at the notes from the family with Jaden Spicer, and then with little Gus Lamont. They didn't want to appear on camera. Now we have Felicia Gross, or whatever the last name what she uses, take your pick. We have Felicia charged over the death of her son. With Gus, we now have a family member or a person on the property named as a suspect in his disappearance. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that Cyndy is a suspect. I'm just saying that, to me, that suggests that she perhaps does know a little bit more than what she's sharing in this interview. I wouldn't be surprised if she definitely does suspect Malaya. Like I said at the beginning, I can't see Malaya confiding in Cyndy, but I do think that this interview is all about evasion. This interview is about ignoring that humongous elephant in the middle of the room, and that Cyndy must surely have some inkling of Malaya being involved, or at the very least knowing what happened to her children. There is this glaring absence of her pleading for people to come forward with what they know, of her pleading for anyone who was involved to speak up and do the right thing. And I think that if she truly believed that Daniel was solely responsible and Malaya had no involvement whatsoever, Malaya knew nothing whatsoever, that surely she would be making pleas like that to the public. So the absence of these pleas certainly makes me think that she strongly suspects that Malaya was somehow involved, that Malaya knows what happened to her children. I find it really frustrating that these people are continuing to protect Malaya, continuing to basically be her front line, and of course continuing to enable her. Because it sounds like, at least publicly, it sounds like they are buying everything she says, hook, line and sinker. Or at the very least, they're coming out and publicly pushing everything that she says and making it sound like they believe everything she says, instead of expecting her to accept some sort of responsibility, accept some accountability. But I realise it would have to be incredibly hard for Cyndy to be in that position, and maybe for her to actually verbalise the concerns, to actually verbalise her belief that Malaya knows, or that Malaya may be partly involved, is possibly just a bit too much, a step too far for her. In a situation like this, you can entertain these thoughts in your head, you can try and keep them squashed down, and you can try to avoid the topic, because the moment they pass through your lips, it suddenly makes it real. So maybe it's just that Cyndy has been trying very hard for the past 9 months to make sure that it doesn't pass her lips, that she thinks that Malaya may be involved in some way, that she thinks that Malaya has to know what happened to her children. So I'm going to finish there. I know we didn't get a lot of information from Cyndy, and I've been trying to be a little bit careful because I recognise that this is the grandmother, one of the grandmothers of these 2 missing children, and that regardless of if she is trying to protect Malaya, regardless of what she does or doesn't know or does or doesn't suspect, I think we need to just keep in mind that this is a really hard time for her. That said, I don't want to give any of these people free passes for ignoring or somehow not paying attention to the fact that Malaya's got to have had some part in this. Cyndy says the hardest part for her family is not knowing what happened, but there's someone who can give them answers. Malaya could give them answers, but it seems like they're all just giving her a free pass. Anyway, I'm going to finish there. I am very interested to hear your thoughts on this. So I will certainly be reading everyone's comments. I know I don't always get a chance to respond, but I do read all your comments. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button. That'll help me get these videos out there into the algorithm, and also please leave a comment below. So thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.